Hey, this is Efrem Smith, and you are experiencing episode 1. That's right. This is the one that's kicking it all off. This is the one that after this one, if the guests are good, you're going to tell your friends and tell your family members, tell the people you go to church with, tell the people at the beauty salon and the barbershop, man, you got to check out that show. So no pressure. But the future of this podcast is weighing on the superpower guest I have with me today.
No pressure
and so over here to my right is Bob Balian. I just happen to co-pastor with this guy at Bayside Church Midtown the heart of the city.
My God.
He is the founder of the Midtown campus of the Bayside family of churches, one of the most multicultural, multiracial churches in the region, in the country. He's born and raised Sacramento. And over here to my, well, this is my right. Did I say my left?
This is your other right.
This is my other right. Did I say right before? That was your right.
Yeah.
Because I wanted you to be right, not me. And so my real right over here is Ricky Jenkins. He's the pastor of Southwest Church in the Coachella Valley. Yeah, if you got Netflix.
It's cool to be in Coachella Valley.
I'm saying.
It's cool to be in Sacramento right now.
Were you in the band when Beyonce was doing the homecoming thing at Coachella? Was that you in the band?
No, I was on the outside of the gate trying to get in.
Oh, okay.
So that was the whole thing.
He's pastoring a church that is thriving, it's growing, it's becoming more multi-ethnic and diverse by the weekend. So I didn't think I could gather this quickly 2 other experts on how do you engage lives, how do you influence change, how can you bring about transformation when you are in a world that is ever increasingly multiracial, multi-ethnic, but yet deeply divided. It seems like we're at a time that even though it's so diverse in our country, we're polarized, we're divided, we could go through all the isms, but I think that people would know that. So we want to take some time on this very first episode to just have a little conversation about that reality. Diversity, yet division. I mean, you could say we live in the divided states of America. And so I want to start with Bob Balian. Talk a little bit about your story, your background. What led you to wanting to stay in your city and to plant a church that would be intentionally multiracial, multi-ethnic?
I mean, I don't mean to brag, but Sacramento was a little bit ahead of its time in terms of integration. I went to a school, John Corbello Elementary School, right in the center of the city. It was so evenly distributed in terms of race. I mean, it was about 20% Asian, 20% white, 20% black, 20% Latin. It really was a pie split up evenly. And so I was fortunate. That was in the 70s when I grew up. Again, way ahead of its time. That may have been a little pocket of Sacramento, but I want to take that with me moving forward. And so I've always God had his hand on me even before I was really following him. Always had his hand on me in terms of giving me a free pass in every culture. Was really well accepted by the African American community because of athletics, et cetera, by the Asian community, by the Latin community. Move forward in life, and even when I was serving the devil with distinction, the parties that I would give, they were always super diverse, and people were like, man, I never seen anything like this, and wanted to take that to the life of the church when I started church. And so when we started our church, 65 people, really intentionally diverse, and as we've grown, we've been really intentional about putting leadership in position that can cross cultural boundaries, that looks like the community. And so it's been diverse since day one, and I think the Sacramento region was dying for that. But I say all that and say at the same time, you're right. Even though there are pockets of integration and diversity, as a whole, we are as fractured as we've ever been in the country right now. I can't think of a time when it's been worse in my lifetime. I don't know how y'all feel.
It seems like one of the keys is engagement. I mean, if you're really going to get around being an influencer, a reconciler, a transforming agent in a deeply diverse, deeply divided reality, it starts with the people you engage, your relationships. It seems like, Bob, like when I go somewhere with you, if I go to Sacramento Kings game, if we're downtown at a restaurant, if we're out in Antelope, at House of Chicken and Ribs, it's like just fluid, natural, your ability just to engage different cultures. It's like you're comfortable with it. Like, how did that come about? Just your ease, your passion to want to engage people cross-culturally, across race.
Man, seriously, I really think it's a God thing, because it's been there from the beginning, and that ain't no joke. I mean, my little league team was super diverse, and I was comfortable with everyone's family, and their families would be so diverse and different. And then I think for some reason, and this is sin too, but like people want you to be what they're comfortable with for the most part. So if a person likes me, like, and they're African American, they kind of want me to be African American. If a person is Asian, they're comfortable around Asians. They want me to be, he's got some Asian in him. He's got a little something, or Latin, same thing. So I think that part of it is our sin nature. Like, I'm comfortable with you, so you must have something I identify with. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I think I played off of that into a positive.
Ricky Jenkins.
Yeah.
So you're originally from the South?
That's right.
Mississippi?
Mississippi, man.
Mississippi.
Yes.
And my cricket letter.
So you grew up in just on the other side of Jim Crow segregation.
Yes.
And so, I would think that you're part of that post-civil rights movement generation.
Yep.
But yet, when people think of the South, they still think of, communities that are divided by railroad tracks. They think of there's still a racial divide along black and white. So growing up in the Deep South, how did you gain your passion, your sense of life mission towards a ministry, a vocation that would build bridges, that would reconcile, that would be multicultural?
For sure. Yeah, well, I'm kind of like Bob as well. I think it's a God thing. And to your point, Efrem, I did kind of come up in this community that was still shell-shocked by what had happened 20 years before. And so my family had a lot of civil rights exposure and experience. So you kind of are raised up in the South, at least in my family, with these narratives of all these treacherous things that went down, fighting for voting rights and trying to get the kids integrated into the big white school, as it were. And then as a young boy, you're still in these stark realities where it's not metaphor. Literally on one side of the tracks, it's this color. And on the other side of the tracks, it's the other color. But man, it was a God thing too, where my parents preached a clear gospel, not a colored one. And you're kind of in this experience where even though it was abnormal for my parents, it was normal for me to always be around other races. And I just noticed the disparity, you know what I'm saying? And so like what was normal for my parents and never being around really people of another race, that was just not the case for me. So Little League teams and Boy Scouts and softball league and all these sorts of stuff, I was with my white brothers and sisters. Mississippi in those days, just black and white. But then church on Sunday, you know what I'm saying? It's just this kind of this monochromatic experience where it's just me. Then you come right back to school on Monday, and it's just, why is this disconnect? And as I started to fall in love with Jesus, I kind of got tired of being able to connect with different friends across the tracks Monday through Saturday, but then Sunday we all go to talk about this Jesus who brings people together. And it's just like that messed with me. And even as a young teenager who was a Christian, I was just naturally dreaming about how the gospel could bring us together. And so, man, that was woven into how I did friendships, how I do relationships, how I did my family, how I did marriage and everything else, and now how I'm trying to do the church. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and just go there. I heard a pastor named Daniel Hill, pastors a multiracial church, multi-ethnic church in Chicago. And he said this at a pastor's gathering. He said, it is easier for someone when they're leading a multi-ethnic, diverse ministry, just to go down the wide road of diversity and avoid the rugged road of race and all the things that come with dealing with race, racism, a racialized reality. And so how for you, Bob, we'll start with you, have you kind of just went there and said, hey, I can't just grow a diverse community. I can't just navigate relationships with different races, ethnicities. I'm going to have to deal with that elephant in the room, the uncomfortable issues that intersect around race and racism. How have you found yourself in dealing with that?
Well, I mean, I'd say a couple of things too about what he said. I'd say he's right and wrong in that it's not easy to go down that road of diversity. Like it's difficult because a lot of people just are not comfortable enough to do it. A lot of people just go, I'm not comfortable enough to give my Sunday morning away to a bunch of people or be around a bunch of people who I'm not comfortable around. So it's still hard. But I think, to be authentic to it, I think you have to address the issues. And the biggest one, the biggest elephant in the room is race. And, you see too much of like on the Caucasian side of wanting to hide that, I don't see race and all. No, that's absolutely insane. Everybody sees race. We need to get to a point where we render race inert, but everyone sees race. So I think just the authenticity thing for me, Efrem, was like, we have to address this. It's what everybody's thinking about in this mixed room right now.
Yeah. How do you, for your congregation, I mean, it's one thing to say, I mean, I love that right now at your church in Coachella Valley, you're talking about being, I want to make sure I'm saying this right, a gospel-centered, intergenerational, multi-ethnic,
That's right.
Bible preaching church. I don't know. Disciple making church.
Exactly.
So disciple making, multi-ethnic, intergenerational, gospel centered.
That's it.
So in claiming that, how has that been received? I mean, I think over the years, the church you pastor has been a predominantly white church.
Absolutely.
It's been a place where people of means go when it gets cold in Chicago and Minneapolis and Detroit. The snowbirds come down.
Yeah, they do.
So how have you gone from this is that winter destination refuge and church for people to we are really gonna claim this valley as a mission field and we're gonna become multi-ethnic?
Yeah. Well, I think it's going and still going. Bob touched on something that I would reflect upon, this idea of authenticity. And at our core, those of us who want to be impactful, who want to leave a legacy, we know that that's synonymous with being challenged. And to be challenged, I've got to be willing to be vulnerable. I've got to be desirous of everything that's authentic, because that's the only thing that's really real, for lack of a better way to express it. So for us down in Southwest, man, I feel like if the core is a centeredness on the gospel of Jesus, then what flows out of that, I think, is a multi-ethnic, intergenerational, discipleship-focused life. I can't turn a page in the New Testament without seeing those realities. And so marrying what is the truth with what a true believer needs, which is realness and to be challenged and authenticity, that's the natural flow. So has it been easy? No. Will there be more difficult days ahead? For sure. But so far, I think people have found a place where, hey, at the end of the day, I care more about your walk with God more than anything else. I want to love you. I want to relate to you. I want to connect to you. I want to shepherd you. But now I've earned some trust to now get into those challenging, more weightier things. And so far, so good. I feel like, though, with everybody being sensationalized by what we see on the news media, what we're reading, how everyone's just retreating to their tribes, right? We're supposed to be the most connected generation ever, but we're the most disconnected generation ever. I think people truly want a path out of that, and the path out of that is the gospel that just so happens to also exclaim this fact that people can come together no matter what we look like, act like, think like, eat like, or vote like. Christ can bring us together. And so there's particulars that I know this conversation will ensue as to what that looks like. But man, I have enjoyed what I think is nothing other than revival, with people hearing the fact that, one, Jesus loves me, but Jesus gives me power to connect with people across the aisles that I never would have connected with otherwise. If that can happen on Sunday morning, let's give up and go fishing now. But I think it can.
Can I ask you,
Sure.
Pastor, is what you're doing possible in Mississippi? Just curious.
Yeah, well, that's my hope and that's my prayer. And so a couple months ago, my family members came for the first time to check us out. We've only been there a little over a year. And, man, I'm just going to keep it real. As Mississippi folks who've seen what they've seen and been through what they've been through, they're coming to check on Junebug at this big white church, to be quite frank. And a part of them is kind of like, let me make sure he's okay. Yeah. And then I think
y'all taking care of Junebug.
Y'all taking care of him. What's going on?
Yeah.
But it was just this magical weekend where I think they're watching me preach and they're thinking to themselves, well, Junebug preaches like he always preaches. They seem to really like it. He's not selling out. They're not faking. What's going on here? And it really had this moment for conversations with my dad and stepmom and grandparents where they were like, we have to go back to Mississippi now with an awareness that this can happen. Yeah. And so if Southwest is to do nothing else but tell the world it can happen, and it may take a generation to get that done, and I'm ready to give that, but so be it, man. What's more worth living for and sacrificing for than that kind of reality?
So what we're doing and what you're doing in the Coachella Valley is just like step one or step two to what may take 100 steps.
That's
but
exactly right.
Headed in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, I always tell our staff down at Southwest, and I tell our church that we're fighting to give to our kids a church that wasn't given to us. And so with that in mind, it kind of sets the reality of this is going to take a lifetime, right? And we'll get better every generation. But my kids are worth it, man. My kids are worth handing over this kind of church.
So, since we're already out the shallow end of the pool, Bob, you and I, as pastors in the city of Sacramento, had a very challenging issue a little over a year ago. African-American young man, Stephon Clark, shot and killed by police officers in his grandmother's backyard. There had been a report that someone fitting his description was going around breaking into cars, looking into homes, so he fit that description. Police came around, thought he had a gun, thought maybe he was looking to break into that house. He dies. City erupts. NBA basketball game shut down. People marching in the streets, on the highway. I was at a city council meeting with the mayor and the city council where it just tension, anger, division. Here we are at our church with police officers and their families, relatives of Stephon Clark, young people that would identify with Black Lives Matter.
Wow.
How do you pastor? How do you muster the ability to speak into, to shepherd through that reality of where we are today?
I mean, I think it's just, primarily it's the ministry of presence, just being present for all of those families, because, everyone involved, and that's what the media does. The media takes out the humanness of it all, but Stephon had a family. The police officers who shot him had a family or have a family. The district attorney has a family. Chief Hahn, who is friends of ours, and he's the first ever African American police chief in the city of Sacramento. The city demanded that the city hire Chief Hahn, and so he's been hired now, and was thrust into a difficult situation. Some people have turned their back on him. We have to minister to Chief Hahn and his family too. So, and you've done it too. You've been there with me step by step. Loving on those families. They all have needs. Being honest where we can be honest and be, like Ricky said, authentic where we can be authentic. It certainly has been challenging. You and I have been hit from every side and from every angle, no matter what we've said. But we've tried to be as fair as humanly possible, and we've tried to love on these families with the backing of our church as best as humanly possible as well, and just shepherd. There's not a whole lot else you can do. I'm not in it. I don't think you're in it either for some kind of political gain or political benefit. I want the city. I want the church to be modeled well in the city of Sacramento, and we want to do that as best as we can.
So good.
Yeah. As we're winding down, one of the things I really love about these two guys right here is when I was younger, I had a youth pastor say to me, in a world, especially in the urban core of our world, where there can be tensions, where there's density and diversity and division and systems that don't always work well and things that come around the corner now like gentrification. In the midst of all that, there are times when you need two kinds of people to effectively navigate it all. And he described them as tree shakers and jelly makers. Now, tree shakers are like the activist people. They're the ones that if you don't know that race is an issue, if you don't know that there's economic class issues, if you don't know that there's systems that are failing us, I'm going to shake the tree. And if the fruit hits you on the head, hey, man, because you should have seen this coming. So there are tree shakers, and we need those people. But there are also jelly makers. Like when the fruit hits the ground, somebody has to pick up that fruit and make jelly that people can digest. That people can be transformed by. And what I love about you two brothers is you're jelly makers. Like you're on the front lines, you're in the midst of this stuff, you're trying to build something that looks like heaven, that deals head on with the divisions and the brokenness and the injustices, but you're doing it in a way where people can digest your heart, your passion, your call. And so I just appreciate the jelly makers in y'all. That's powerful. I'm going to close with this. That's going to be in a sermon, I think. We're going to close on this. When I was pastor in Minneapolis, we used to have this buffet meal. And I would say, bring a dish that represents your culture, your upbringing, your ethnicity. And so we'd have these dinners at this church in Minneapolis, and we'd have the enchiladas next to the fried rice, next to the collard greens. I mean, it was so powerful. We had pumpkin pie and sweet potato pie. but we did outlaw chitlins and lutefisk. We couldn't bring those two items. They were not welcome because you just can't deal with them two smells colliding. But when we were there eating all of this food, hot dishes, casseroles, cobblers, I would say to the people, in the same way that we're digesting one another's foods, we have to digest one another's pain, one another's dreams, one another's visions, one another's experiences. It's not the only way, but that's one way to navigate the divided states of America. The brokenness is people have to be willing to sit down and digest the story of an African-American male that doesn't ever want to be pulled over by the police under any circumstance. But we also have to digest the story of the police officer that leaves their spouse and their kids and their families praying they make it home that night. We have to digest the story of the immigrant. We have to digest the story of the marketplace executive, the person that didn't vote the way you voted. It's one way to get on the road to transformation, bridge building, and change. Along with there's gonna have to be some work to change some systems. But I appreciate y'all, and we have gotten through the first episode. I hope this was enough, this little appetizer, to keep you listening, to keep you paying attention to this little podcast we've launched. God bless you.